What up gamers, I'm Sir Mav and welcome back to another Anthem video. It's been a long time coming, but I'm finally ready to present to you my first Javelin build. Today we will be talking about what I call fire and ice. We all know the majority of you within Anthem love the storm, including myself, so I thought I'd showcase this amazing build first. During this video I will break down each piece of gear, weapon suggestions that synchronize well with this build, and what components I would recommend to maximize your TBS as well as survivability. Keep in mind these builds will only incorporate Masterwork gear and above, as you want the ability to utilize the unique properties these gear pieces come with. So if you find this video helpful, hit that like button and tap fire subscribe so you don't miss out on the future Anthem builds to come. This build specifically for the Storm utilizes DPS power as well as crowd control to take control of any area and dish out damage to high profile targets and mobs alike. It's also a well-balanced build for taking on any type of enemy, from annoying shield hunter Scars to the tanky Ursix or Scar Enforcer, and it's all built around the Storm's focus seal ability 10,000 Suns, which is the upgraded version of the Burning Orb ability. If you're not yet familiar with this ability, it's basically the power of the sun in your hands. It can be quickly thrown as rapid fire mini fireballs or charged to throw one all hellfire of the sun down on your targets. This allows the ability versatility in your attacks. Since 10,000 Suns is a masterwork, it comes with the property known as Striker's Wrath, which states after hitting an enemy, the ability gains 5% increased damage for 5 seconds. And here's the best part, you can stack this property up to 20 times, meaning when you get a full stack of 20, 10,000 Suns will then do double the damage. My inscriptions on this ability are not too shabby either, as I have gear plus 175% damage, which already almost triples the base damage of the 10,000 Suns, and LB plus 5% damage, which gives my second ability an additional 5% damage, as 10,000 Suns is the right bumper ability on console. Which leads me to my second ability, Hailstorm's Renewal, which is an upgraded version of Ice Blast. Now some of you who are very familiar with the Storm might ask why I wouldn't choose Ice Storm over Ice Blast. Well, it has to do a lot with the Masterwork properties between the two. Ice Blast, or what's known as Winter's Wraith when a Masterwork and above, its property allows you to refill your charges when defeating an enemy from above, but in my opinion, Hailstorm's Renewal offers a more important utility to this build. As I want to maintain survivability when playing harder content, especially in GM3, Hailstorm Renewal's property states that when defeating an enemy from above, it instantly restores 75% of your Storm's shield, which can be useful when in the thick of battle with little to no cover in sight. Now, not everyone will acquire this on their gear, but I was lucky enough to obtain inscriptions where the damage is increased by 20% damage, which helps me make that last-ditch effort to take out low-health enemies. And 100% charges is a great inscription, as well as it grants me an additional Ice Blast charge, which helps me take down enemies to enable the property, or proc other useful properties, which we'll talk about next through components. Side note before I move on, I definitely don't have my inscriptions optimized within this build. At the end, I'll state which inscriptions I would change on my gear to fully optimize this Javelin to my own preferences. So next we have my components. First up we have the Token of the Pupil component. Now I know this is a legendary piece of gear, but the build works the same whether it's a legendary item or masterwork. You just simply have more power and survivability with legendary gear. So first off, this component increases the number of combo chains by 2. This works with the Storm's combo effect, which allows you to apply the status effect you comboed to an additional 2 or more enemies than the base. If you want to learn more on combo effects for each Javelin, you can click on the card above or check out the link in the description box below. The property though is really what we want from this component. The property states that when you hit an enemy with LB, which is our Ice Blast ability, it increases the damage of RB by 60% for 5 seconds. So already we have a significant increase in damage to our Burning Orb ability. But wait, there's more. Next we have the Amulet of Winter, which straight up increases ice damage by 5% and ice effect by 5%. Yes, it's blank due to a bug with the current build of the game, but originally it was 5%. So this component already provides more damage to my Ice Blast and increases its ability to apply ice effects to enemies. On top of that, its property allows me to gain an increase in weapon damage by 20% for 20 seconds when I apply an ice effect to said enemy. This attributes to our guns, which I'll get into later, but basically this allows my already powerful weapons to dish out even more damage when I apply an ice effect on an enemy. Also, I love the inscription Ultimate Speed on this component, as it increases the rate at which my ultimate meter regenerates itself. Don't really need pistol ammo. Again, I'll discuss what I would change on my inscriptions at the end. My third component I would recommend for this build is the Mark of Ruin, which increases fire damage by 5% and fire effect by 5%. So already I have a passive 5% damage added on top of my Burning Orb by just equipping this component. On top of that, its property is, while Ice Blast charges, my Burning Orb damage is increased by 40% for 20 seconds. Now it's getting interesting, but let's get through the components and then I'll explain how you want to utilize each of these abilities. Next up is the Token of Daring component, which passively increases my elemental damage by 35% and decreases physical damage by 35%. But let's be honest though, if you're in the storm, physical damage doesn't really matter all that much. The property of Token of Daring states that a shield break increases seal damage by 20% for 20 seconds. This is speaking directly to your shield. So if your shield breaks on the storm while in battle, damage for the Burning Orb and Ice Blast will be increased by 20%. Which can be useful when trying to proc Hellstorm's Renewal and gain back 75% of your shield. Second to last component is Vanguard's Token, which is more of a survivability piece for the Fire and Ice build. It passively increases armor by 25%, which is always useful if your shield breaks. In addition to that is the property where if your shield breaks, you gain an additional 10% in damage resistance for 20 seconds. Useful when trying to find quick cover from enemies if you're not able to proc Hellstorm's Renewal. And last we have Gunslinger's Mark, which was broken for a bit and is now finally fixed. Passively, this component increases gear recharge rate by 50%, meaning I can utilize my abilities more often, and lowers gear damage by 20%. 20% reduction is really not that big of a deal given the property and other procs on this build. The property of Gunslinger's Mark allows my Storm to do an additional 60% damage to enemy weak points while hovering. Storm 101 folks, always be hovering should be your motto. If you're not hovering, you're losing out on the additional damage mitigation you gain from being in the air. Ground is lava, don't touch it. So before we jump into how everything cohesively goes together, let's cover the support ability and weapons real quick. I will be using Quickening Field as my support ability, as even with the buff to Wind Wall, I still find Quickening Field more viable in its use. A 20% increase in recharge rate allows me to almost instantly gain all of my abilities back when both are all the way on full cooldown. Also helps when you're in a squad, as it allows them to gain their abilities back just as fast. So the two weapons I'm using for this build is Ralnar's Blaze, which is just an upgraded hammerhead assault rifle, and Avenging Herald. And no, I'm not using the heavy pistol because of its damage output, even though it is nice. It's more on the basis because this gun rolled with 2 RB speed inscriptions, which adds onto the already 50% faster recharge rate from Gunslinger's Mark. But still a great gun to use in this build, as its property is Raptor's Deadeye, which states while hovering increases weapon damage by 200%. I'm also mainly using Ralnar's Blaze due to its rolls as well, but it also comes with a hard-hitting utility to it which synchronizes well with this build. This assault rifle property allows you to set enemies on fire, applying a fire effect, which allows you and your team to then combo even boss targets when they're set ablaze. But key note on the inscriptions, with this gun equipped, I gain an additional 110% to my shield and 70% on my armor. Definitely helps with survivability. Another great weapon to this build is the assault rifle Elemental Rage. Its property is Veteran's Furor, which increases all elemental damage by 5% when hitting elite enemies for 10 seconds. The ability to stack this up to 20 times also allows you to double your elemental damage on top of everything else. This also applies to the Storm's ultimate abilities, so it's a great option when using against a main boss, as you double your ultimate's first hit on the boss. So in conjunction with Ralnar's Blaze, you could proc your 20 stack, set an enemy on fire, and then utilize your ultimate for a devastating combination of effects. Okay, so how does this all work? Well, with this build, you're basically going to want to spam 10,000 Suns most of the time. This will proc Striker's Wrath and stack depending upon how many enemies you hit on the first blast, or how many you continue to hit consecutively there afterwards. Do this in unison with Ice Blast and you'll proc Token of Pupil and Mark of Ruin, which by themselves gives 10,000 Suns an additional 80% damage output on top of the other passive damage procs. Plus, you're hovering, right? You better be hovering, you're a damn storm for crying out loud. Anyway, this also procs Gunslinger's Mark, which allows you an additional 60% damage to weak points. When your Ice Blast is on cooldown, you can also use Ralnar's Blaze to apply fire effects to enemies so that you set you and your team up for combos. And if you have Elemental Rage equipped, be sure to proc Veteran's Furor before initiating your ultimate for additional damage. So you can see on your screen now how every slot is utilized within this build and their inscriptions. Some of the inscriptions I have are nice, especially on my guns, but if I was to choose so that I min-max this build, I would place all ultimate speed on one inscription for each of my components, and would want about an equal amount of armor, shield, and overall damage within the rest of my inscriptions. This would allow for a balance between survivability and damage output for this build. And that, my friends, is the Fire and Ice build for the Storm. I do have some other ideas of builds that could be utilized for the Storm, so if you're interested in seeing more, hit that like button and tap fire subscribe for future videos on Anthem. So now I want to hear from you. Anything you would change up on this build? Have a different weapon you would utilize? Let me know down in the comments below. I do read through every one of them, so I look forward to having a discussion with you all. But until next time, gamers, this is Sir Mav, signing off.